What's up, y'all? Welcome back to the Mythosphere, the no place and the every place. This is your host, Jehoshaphat Sunrays, and I have some tales to tell today. Alright, this episode is brought to you by Things Publishing. Things is a publishing company that is run by a couple of amazing human beings who are incredibly generous and love but are advocates of weirdness. So, thank you to Things Publishing. Okay, I wanted to tell a story. Well, actually, I wanted to talk about a story. I guess, really, I want to talk about a line in a song that made me think about a bunch of stories, of which I'm going to discuss one. So, y'all are all familiar with the story of Jacob and Esau, right? This is a story from the Old Testament Bible. Can't remember which book. I think it must be in Genesis. But Jacob was the second son of Isaac. And the story of Isaac is pretty great also, but I'll maybe talk about that on another time, because my interpretation of his story is not something that I've really ever heard anyone else interpret it as. But anyway. Excuse me. Anyway, Jacob was the second son of Isaac, and he was kind of I guess, what we would nowadays call an effete mama's boy. Would we call it that nowadays? I don't know if anybody even knows what the word effete means anymore. We've diminished our vocabularies so radically in the last 40 or 50 years. Anyway, Jacob was a kind of a mama's boy. He was the second son. And Esau was the tough, do-right, rule-following, manly man who did everything as was expected of him. And being the first son, he was entitled to the birthrights of Isaac, which was basically the heritage of I'd say the Ur-Israelites or Proto-Israelites, because that name didn't exist yet, as this story elucidates. So Esau was out hunting one day, and Jacob and his mom had contrived to get the birthrights for him. And so they went over to the fire, and they cooked up what's the word I'm looking for? Irresistible. They cooked up an irresistible stew, and just the smells alone wafted into Isaac's tent, and he probably started salivating at the mouth just smelling it. Isaac at this point, by the way, was blind, and that's really important to this next part of the story. So after Jacob and his mom finished the stew, they dressed him up in furs, because Esau was a really hairy dude, and so they put a kind of a disguise on Jacob so that he could trick Isaac. And he takes the stew into the tent. He somehow convinces Isaac that he is Esau. Even, I assume, while talking to him, you would think that Isaac, especially being blind, would be able to hear the difference between their voices, but apparently he didn't. And then he asked for his birthrights now, and to be sure it was Esau, Isaac asked him to kneel down, and he felt him, touched him, and he felt all the fur, which, again, somehow tricked him. The details actually, though, are not super important. There's lots of questions in great stories that if you start questioning, the nitpicking on the details will make it fall apart, but it misses the point of the story. So Jacob tricks Isaac into giving him his birthrights. And when Esau finds out, he's understandably extremely pissed off. And so much so that he's going to kill Jacob. So Jacob basically has to go on the lam for a certain period of time. It may say how much in the story. I don't actually remember. Again, that detail, as far as I'm concerned, for these purposes anyway, is not important. Jacob goes on the lam, and while he is away, he goes through many adventures, many trials and tribulations. He is told by God that he is going to be the patriarch, the progenitor of the continuation of the Hebrew line. So not only did he get the birthrights of his family line through Isaac, God actually lets him know that he was chosen by him as well. So eventually he ends up having to wrestle with one of God's angels in God's stead. So essentially he wrestles with God, which is another story that I think is deeply profound. But after this night of fighting with God, he is permanently injured in his hip, and from then on he is named Israel, and he becomes the namesake of the Hebrew people. So what got me thinking about that story is a line from one of my favorite musical groups, Shabazz Palaces, and I think this is off the album Black Up, the first track. I can't remember the name of the track, but he says on there at some point, he says, "Deception is the truest act," and I've always thought that was really a really deep line. I've thought about it in a lot of different ways, and I think that, I've thought about it in relation to the concept of, what a tangled web we weave when first we practice to deceive. And I think that's true, but I think it's true on, it's one of those things that's true on a lot of different levels. You can read it as that it's a bad thing, but you can also read it as, when we first practice to deceive, that first time that you go back on your own and you imitate something, or you pretend to be something else. In some ways, this is the essence. No, I don't want to say the essence, but it's one of the essential natures of humanity and maybe animals in general is this maybe nature in general, this ability to mimic. Heraclitus has one of my favorite aphorisms ever, where he says, nature loves to hide. In Greek, it's, I don't know how to pronounce it, but it's something to the effect of phusis cryptus thai philae. Phusis, which is nature or becoming, cryptosai, which is where our word cryptic comes from, philae, which is loves. Nature loves to hide. And I think it's such a deep principle of nature, this act of deception. Deception is the truest act, says the great Palliser Lazaro. It got me thinking about that Jacob and Esau story, because Jacob commits this act of deception that, on the surface of it, is an actual deep betrayal, but in some ways it's such a deeply true maneuver on his part. It ends up being the kind of catalyst for him becoming the namesake of the Israelites. And I just think that that's so profound, and I think that is a metaphor in general for art. That's what art is. Artifice. Art is deception, but it's deception in the service of some deeper truth, a truth that you cannot get at through mere prose or through mere explication, through mere intellect. You can never arrive at it there. You have to commit some sort of deep deception.
Feelings, fuck your facts. Deception is the truest act. With poise, I twirl the bluest slack. Dougie hold the oohest sax. I danced and moved to play the back. I dipped, she asked him, who was that?
I ain't show off, I just showed up. Greet my peoples, fill they cup. Transmit heat on pillows, plush. I mean it though.
I lean and flow, I gleam and glow. I'm clean and oh, you betcha that I get it, bro. Inside the glow, just not for show. 3 beans, purples, indigo. Catchy, yes, but trendy, no.
Real
Never
again,
feed
real.
scheming, no.
And I corrected that statement and said what I was trying to do was to make something which was unreal but true. And I think that's